Then it's also a question about competition. The higher the competition, the stronger the competition, the more competitors there are on the market, the more difficult it also becomes product penetration. Larger market leader makes it difficult to get into the market. Saturated markets with many competitors make market entry also difficult. And so the higher the competition, the more difficult it becomes also to launch successfully a new product. Then third, there are facilitating conditions. These are standards and the compatibility of standards and technologies. This means that the higher an innovation or the more an innovation is retro-compatible with a former technology, the easier it gets and the more it gets accepted. Let's see some examples to illustrate facilitating conditions. The first example concerns the CD player, which was launched in the 80s by Philips. There was low retro-compatibility with the former standard, that is, vinyl discs. The problem was that customers or consumers who had vinyl discs could not use their collection on the new DVD player. These were naturally high barriers for adoption, as the whole collection of vinyl discs could not be used on the new CD player. Therefore, it took a long time for the CD player to get adopted, even if the quality, the digital quality, was higher than the quality of the former vinyl discs. Another example concerns the Blu-ray DVD players. There was a high retro-compatibility, which meant that customers who bought the new DVD player with the Blu-ray standard were able to use the whole DVD collection and could use them on the new Blu-ray player. There was thus high retro-compatibility and high facilitating conditions, which increased the acceptability of the new technology, and the adoption of the new technology was quite quickly, because first of all customers could use the older DVD collection, and second, they were already familiar with new technology and no learning was required. Another example concerns the video sector, the video recording sector in the 70s and 80s. There were different players on the market and all the standards were not compatible. So the users of one standard, for example VHS, could not use the tapes, the videotapes on other players, for example the standard Video 2000. So there's low retro-compatibility, and the change from one standard or one technology to another one was difficult and inhibiting the change to these new technologies. A last and more recent example concerns the standards of different mobile phones or operating systems. You could take the example of smartphones. You have on the one hand iOS from Apple and on the other hand Android from Google with the different smartphone types. Actually, it is quite difficult to change from iOS to Android because of switching barriers related to a lack of retro-compatibility. In other words, if you have applications on iOS or if you have learned to work on iOS, it might appear difficult to change from iOS to Android and vice versa. A last example concerns operating systems from computers. If we take the example, the update of operating systems on Microsoft Windows, sometimes the retrocompatibility of software is low. For example, on Windows Vista, some software packages did not work anymore, which actually is a barrier of adoption and was a barrier of adoption for Microsoft Vista. You can find the same example for Apple iOS. Recently, there was an update available to go to Catalina. The problem was and is, if you update to the latest iOS operating system, some software packages such as Office do not work anymore. So in other words, if you have bought software packages as Office, you cannot use them anymore if you update on the new operating system of Apple. So in summary, facilitating conditions and compatibility of standards and technologies is an important criterion for product acceptability and product adoption. If products are not compatible or retrocompatible with former standards, customers and developers of complementary products take a wait-and-see attitude. Which technology will win? Customers will wait to see how the market evolves and will wait until a technology is established and the technology is highly retrocompatible with the former standards. On the other hand, compatibility with former technologies reduces uncertainty and risk for customers and favors technology acceptance.
Now this brings me to the correlated standard constructions. So when you create a standard, such as VHS, then you become the leader in the market. Everybody is talking about VHS, or we have other examples of standards such as Kleenex or Tempo in Germany for paper tissues, or Polaroid instant cameras. And so these brands were the first, or were the leaders, and become the standard in the market, and makes imitation difficult because of customer learning. Because customers take these brands as standards and buy only these brands because they're used to buy them. For technical products, it's even more important. Because if you take the example of Office, you have learned to use Office. They're freeware, Open Office. Who is using Open Office? Here, probably very few. Because we have learned to work with Office. Most of the students still use Word because we're used to them. SPSS, this is typical, an example of customer learning. You have learned to use SPSS, so you're afraid to use R. SPSS has become the standard, and that is why we pay very high prices for SPSS.
There are barriers of market entry or competition. In theories of competition in economics, a barrier to entry or an economic barrier to entry is a fixed cost that must be incurred by a new entrant, regardless of production or sales activities, into a market that incumbents do not have or have not had to incur. There are different sources of barriers to entry. Common barriers to entry include patents. This includes the need for new firms to obtain proper licenses and customers before operation. This is related to intellectual property, which is a good barrier to entry. This is the case as potential entrants require access to equally efficient knowledge and production technology as the competent monopolist in order to freely enter a market. Patents, licensing, and established high-technology production processes also create formidable barriers to entry. Patents give a firm the legal right to stop other firms producing a product for a given period or time, and so restrict entry to a market. Patents are intended to encourage invention and technological progress by guaranteeing proceeds as an incentive. Similarly, trademarks and service marks may represent a kind of entry barrier for a particular product or service if the market is dominated by one or a few well-known names. We can cite examples such as Nespresso. The Nespresso capsule is based on a patent, and for a long time, since the 80s until the years 2000, for more than 20 years, Nespresso maintained a monopolistic situation and dominated the market for the capsules. Only when the patent was finished, competitors emerged and entered the market. Another good example is the Dyson vacuum cleaner without bag. Dyson held for a long time the patent for vacuum cleaners without bag. So for a long time, competitors could not enter the market. And finally, high technology firms such as Apple, Sony, and Samsung with patents lock the market. Other barriers to entry include strong brand capital as well as strong product differentiation, associated with strong customer loyalty, which is associated to high customer switching cost, also called customer logging. This includes the need for new firms to obtain proper customers and to create a strong brand capital based on brand awareness. There are economies of scale, which are cost advantages that raise the stakes in a market, which can deter and delay entrance into the market. Other barriers of entry are capital requirements, such, for example, in marketing, advertising investments. Incumbent firms can seek to make it difficult for new competitors by spending heavily on advertising that new firms would find more difficult to afford or unable to staff and or to undertake. This is known as the market power theory of advertising. Here, established firms use advertising creates a customer perceived difference in its brand from other brands to a degree that consumers see its brand as a slightly different product. Since the brand is seen as a slightly different product, products from existing or potential competitors cannot be perfectly substituted in place of the established firm's brand. This makes it hard for new competitors to gain consumer acceptance. You can cite the example of Procter & Gamble. With very high advertising spendings and investments, they avoid that new entrants or potential competitors come into the market because they dominate with high spendings the advertising markets. Finally, some companies try to prevent new competitors from entering a market by negotiating exclusive contracts with distributors, retailers, or suppliers. Here are some examples of markets with high barriers to entry. For example, the telecommunication or energy sectors, or the consulting and education sector. Examples with markets with low barriers are low differentiated markets, as for example retail or electronic companies. The internet naturally helped to decrease these market entry barriers. Markets with high entry barriers have few players and thus high profit margins.